Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are located around the country. That's one of the fun parts of having our webinars at noontime in my time zone. I can say both of those welcomes to you. We have a really good lineup today and a really good topic for our webinar here in July. This is the CBRS Alliance Explores Future of Industrial OnGo Deployments. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So first, a little housekeeping. By joining this webinar, you agree to the terms of the CBRS Alliance privacy policy and webinar disclosure located in the event description. We are recording this webinar for use later and distribution later. So good news, you'll be able to share this with your colleagues and we'll be able to have this on the website for folks that aren't unfortunately able to join us in person today. Next slide. So introduce myself very quickly. So I'm Alan Ewing, the Executive Director of CBRS Alliance. And as you see here, this is a little bit dated now because I'm very pleased to say we added our 173rd member today. So the Alliance is really doing well. So we are definitely more than 100 wireless telecom organizations. Hopefully we'll be able to say 200 at some point in the near future as well. But of course, what we are dedicated to doing is bringing LTE and eventually 5G and R-based solutions to this band known as the CBRS band in the 3.5 gigahertz region of the spectrum. Great for both in-building, out-building, and we're going to talk today specifically about industrial applications with two really key member companies. First of all, our friends from GHz. And I'll introduce James first, and then I'll get to Ken here in just a second. But we're very fortunate to have really distinguished presenters today. So our first presenter will be James Jacobellis. James is the VP of Partners and Business Development at GHz. He has over 25 years experience. We were joking about that the other day that he's going to have to update that just like our numbers. It'll be 30 before long, right, James? And as a wireless executive and entrepreneur, at GHz, he's VP of Partners and Business Development. Prior to GHz, he worked at IP Access Limited as VP of Sales for the Americas and has held executive positions at a variety of technology companies, such as Motorola. James has also been an advisor to several in-building cellular and wireless LAN companies, assisting them with the development of their business plans, technology assessment, and sales execution. Our other distinguished presenter today, Ken Husek, is with Cradlepoint. Ken is the Vice President of IoT Strategy and Business Development at Cradlepoint. And so he's there defining the company's IoT strategy and for driving strategic industry partnerships to accelerate the company's market growth and leadership. As part of the leadership team since 2009, Ken has helped drive Cradlepoint's growth and development through roles in strategic planning, product management, solution strategy, and thought leadership. Ken frequently represents the company at industry conferences and events and served on the original advisory board for the IoT M2M Evolution magazine. Ken holds BS Electrical Engineering and an MS degree in Manufacturing Engineering, both from Stanford University. And Ken told us we had to mention Stanford University specifically. So just kidding, of course. So gentlemen, first of all, thank you for being here with us. Quick agenda overview, and then we'll get started into some materials for you. So welcome introduction, of course. I will be talking to you a little bit about what OnGo and CBRS is all about. We'll then go in with Jim talking about connectivity challenges in the industrial use case. And then following that, Ken's going to bring us some insights into an actual use case, some experience there. And then how to get started with all of this. We will have time for question and answers. One thing I would encourage our participants to realize is there is a question panel in your OnGo webinar control panel. What we will do is we'll field those questions. If we can answer them easily, we will do so in text. We will serve those questions up to our presenters at the end of their presentations for a little bit of discussion. Any questions that we do not get to, we will capture in text. We'll write up answers and we will publish that information as part of the materials we publish on the website. So with that, Moving on to the next slide. I may have jumped on my Q&A slide. We'll address the questions, as I mentioned, at the end. So, what is OnGo and CBRS? So here to help a little bit with that, tell you a little bit about our organization. So as mentioned, CBRS Alliance now is 173 member companies. What you see along the top here is our board representative companies. So American Tower, Boingo, CommScope, Ericsson, Federated, Google, Intel, Nokia, and Motorola Solutions. And then you see a remarkable list below. We've redesigned this slide once, twice, 3 times. We're going to probably have to redesign it again because we continue to have companies excited about this space and joining us. Next slide. So just a quick overview of the history of all of this, if you're not as familiar with what CBRS is all about. So originally, the story starts before 2010, but for the sake of argument in 2010, where the NTIA identified this band for spectrum sharing, shared use. And in the work that was done into 2014, where FCC had finalized a proposal for how this could be done, then in 2016, CBRS Alliance was born, and the primary mission of the Alliance is the use of this particular spectrum known as the CBRS band, deploying 3GPP-based technologies. So this means LTE, 5GNR, etc. The OnGo brand, which we talk about quite a bit, was launched in 2018. We got our first coexistence specifications really put together in 2018. 2019 is when things became real with our initial commercial deployment launch. And then finally, in this year, very beginning of the year, full commercial service was authorized by the FCC. We continue to advance the specification development and allow for even working to allow for 5G deployments in this band. The other major topic that you probably hear about quite a bit in the discussions is the PAL auction, the Priority Access License auction that is taking place shortly. So, very good. Next slide. So again, a brief history. What we talk about when we talk about CBRS is really codified by the FCC under Part 96. That is from the Code of Federal Regulations. The full section, title, verse, etc. They're identified for you. We work closely with the Wireless Innovation Forum, colloquially known as the WIN Forum, and make sure that we are developing the test and certification schemes, in particular, to support LTE. Here you see a little bit of breakdown between the industry organizations, Wireless Innovation Forum, WIN Forum, and ourselves. The primary difference, Wireless Innovation Forum is technology agnostic. So there isn't any specific technology, radio access technology, that Wireless Innovation supports. They instead are doing all the work to make sure that the band is shareable and that the mechanisms for that sharing are well designed, well vetted, and approved. The Alliance, CBRS Alliance's job is to particularly evangelize the 3GPP-based technologies, LTE and 5G, in the band. So we work on coexistence issues, network services issues. We build on top of what 3GPP already does. Next slide. Here you see a very quick overview of the spectrum. This is 150 megahertz prime real estate. As they say in real estate, it's all about location, location, location. That's really what CBRS is we are in prime real estate here, and 150 megahertz is an embarrassment of riches. We share that with the incumbents that you see here, military-based, ship-based radar, ground-based radars, fixed satellite services, and for the moment, the WISPs. The WISP currently operate under what's known as Part 90 rules. They will evolve into CBRS Part 96 rules in the coming months. Then you see the other 2 levels of access. There is the PAL, the Priority Access License section. These are the folks that have purchased the rights to move up in the prioritization table, and it's on a county by county basis. There are 7 licenses, each of them 10 megahertz, available per county in the US. And then finally, the bottom tier, GAA, General Authorized Access. This is if no other of the prioritization table are in play, the spectrum is available for use as General Authorized Access. Next slide. So one thing that has been really, I think, unique and interesting about the work we've done is this is a private-public partnership with the FCC, the NTIA, the Department of Defense, with the U.S. government in general. And one of the things we've really enjoyed has been an incredibly positive and productive relationship with all of these organizations and all of these agencies. So that is underpinned by the fact that these folks are willing to speak publicly about how well this has all worked. And you see here, in particular, to point out Chairman Pai in a statement, basically saying that the FCC has made it a priority to free up the mid-band spectrum for advanced wireless services, and that I'm pleased to announce the latest step to achieve that priority. And so this has really been a success for that public-private partnership mode of thinking. Next slide. So just a real brief, because there often is a little bit of confusion. OnGo is our brand name. So OnGo is used to describe the deployment of 3GPP-based technologies, so LTE, 5G, and R in our band. So this is the branding that we use to describe the work we do to make spectrum sharing real for LTE and 5G and R. The band is known as the CBRS band, and we are known as the CBRS Alliance. We are that industry association supporting OnGo deployments. And then CBRS as a general term is used by the FCC and others to describe the band itself and the rulemaking that was associated with defining the band. Next slide. So I think we're really ready to get into the main attraction here, which is some connectivity challenges in the industrial use case. And I'm very fortunate, and it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend Jim Jacobellis, as mentioned earlier. And Jim, without further ado, please take it away and tell us more.
Thank you very much, Alan, and welcome everybody. My name is Jim Jacobellis, or James Jacobellis. I'm with a company called GeoVerse, and our parent company, ATN International, are proud members of the CBRS Alliance. And our role in the ecosystem of CBRS is really enabling enterprises and partners to use our kind of carrier resources to enable public-private use cases, things like VoLTE, so that sort of thing. Alan, you can next slide. And as background, one of the things I'm going to be talking about, because GeoVerse has been involved in CBRS installations, both pre-commercial and commercial. So we've had the opportunity to work with a wide variety of industrial and non-industrial customers, and I'm going to give you our perspective on what we see in the marketplace as far as connectivity challenges. And before I even start talking about that, I think it's important to reference that industrial connectivity challenges are not really new. And for over 20 years, as you go around the world, industrial type mining, oil and gas have relied on cellular technology to enable some of their use cases that they couldn't. And this happened mainly in very rural areas, like locations in South America and Australia and Asia. Those mines and oil and gas companies, they were just absolutely needed some sort of cellular communication. So many times the government got involved, because remember, these were extremely valuable to those countries' economies, this sort of exploration. And so they forced the various carriers' hand who own that spectrum to be able to give them spectrum. So at first they started using it for general, cellular type communications with phones, but it quickly evolved where they used this spectrum, and this predates LTE. So even in the GSM world, they started using it for IoT. At the time, it was just called telemetry, but it has since morphed into kind of the birthplace of industrial automation. And in the US, that sort of getting carrier spectrum had been very difficult to do. And now that CBRS is here, those in the industrial space have the opportunity to kind of take this into our own hands. And it's not only available for the very rural, it's kind of available for what you might consider the mainstream industrial user. So as you go into this mainstream and even, what you might consider even like, somewhat urban industrial, the challenges remain the same. The carriers, when they set up cell networks, et cetera, they didn't necessarily target these industrial buildings. So you try and bring a phone in there or a tablet for general use, and a lot of times they don't work. Well, CBRS solves that problem. In general, Wi-Fi is not good enough for some of the mission critical use cases that you'll see. And because a lot of the industrial kind of owners are very, very touchy on security, Wi-Fi is also not good enough for that. So they're more and more leaning on CBRS or planning to use CBRS because of that. And also, unlike a lot of office buildings, you can't wire Ethernet or you can't wire fiber to take care of the problem. Plus, you're dealing with some new, autonomous elements, whether they be, robotic lifts, drones, et cetera. You can't wire those. So, and you can't use Wi-Fi. So CBRS has become more and more being used for things like that. And the other way that a lot of industrial users used to go with their carrier of choice and get some private VPN connectivity from that carrier. But again, they were often unreliable because of coverage and other things. And they weren't able to keep the analytic data that went along with that. So CBRS now, with the right network, gives you the opportunity to not only solve these connectivity challenges, but due to the fact that Alan mentioned, this is a 3GPP network, and all the benefits come along with you for private use. So you get to keep that data too. So it's an amazing thing that's happening right now, and I think industrial users are at the forefront, and some of them are actually leading the CBRS efforts. Go on to the next slide. So Geoverse, like I said, we've been doing CBRS stuff for well over 2 years now, and we've been working consistently with commercial real estates and some of the building tenants that are part of commercial real estate. And what you're seeing now that I think COVID has accelerated is a big time demand shift to focus on in the industrial side. And specifically, you're seeing a massive movement to just-in-time manufacturing and localized distribution centers to keep up with all this online demand. So more and more, you're seeing both testing and deploying of CBRS networks in this environment. And you see the picture there, you got a lot of robotic elements going on, and that has become, the norm now. And you have to keep up on the automation side and on the management of inventory on route side in order to, be as efficient as possible now, because you got to deliver things in a day, and pretty much, everything is going online. So CBRS is playing a key role, and we think will play even a more key role as time goes on. Next slide, please. And Alan told me I had to focus on a use case. So, and even though the title of today's webinar is kind of future, one of the things that is actually happening today from a use case perspective in the industrial vertical is logistics companies using CBRS. They're actually, a lot of them are using it today. A lot of them will be using it even more in the future. but they're taking advantage of the fact that it's a 3GPP, which is a standard that basically makes this look like a cellular network. So when you're managing assets, both inside and outside your facility, CBRS gives you that private network that also allows you to work when it's in a public network as well, with the right network. So also gives you the ability to use policy enforced methodology for your cell phone, for your tablets, for your IoT devices. So that, like I said, there's a lot of security requirements in this industry. CBRS, for the first time in the history of the US, gives you the freedom to use that. There's also, if you look at the fact that, nobody is carrying around paper anymore, and more you're going to either getting information on a tablet, or sometimes you're in virtual reality, augmented reality mode in this environment with what you do. And CBRS takes over for Wi-Fi in this environment, because Wi-Fi has proven that, unless you have a really robust localized network, it's not necessarily good enough for this environment. So you're seeing a lot of CBRS testing and deploying because of this. And all in all, and this is going to be my final statement, is in the industrial arena, a lot of what I'm saying, you're actually seeing an immediate ROI to kind of use CBRS. And I think that's why, all this talk about Industrial 4.0 is, you're seeing the attachment to CBRS. And, I think this is a here and now more than a future thing. And so I'm gonna turn this over to Ken Hosak from Cradlepoint, who's also very experienced in the industrial space, and he's going to talk about some of the use cases that he's seeing now. And Ken, over to you.
Hey, thanks, James. Appreciate it. Hey, go ahead and go to 2 slides. You can skip that one and go to this one. So, as you know, the folks in the CBRS Alliance have been working on this for several years, and there's been a lot of challenges that they faced to bring this to fruition. And I was at the commercial launch party for the CBRS Alliance, launching OnGo and being able to launch commercial deployment last fall. That was for initial commercial deployment. We talked about some case studies there, and we had full commercial deployment at the beginning of the year. And so I'm very, very happy. I know a lot of the people who have been working on this for years, they really had this vision. They were excited to actually see deployments. And so I'm really happy to be able to talk about a deployment using OnGo CBRS from a company called PK Companies. And the use case itself is focused on worker safety at large oil and gas refineries. And core to their solution is an OnGo Private LTE network that uses CBRS spectrum to connect a lot of various devices and video cameras and workers. So for the case study, I'll go through, who is PK Companies and what they do for oil and gas refineries. I'll talk about the requirements that they have from a networking perspective to connect all their different devices, some of the challenges that they have from a networking perspective and why they chose OnGo CBRS, and then I'll go through their solution, show you what they actually ship, go through some quotations that they have that talk about using OnGo CBRS, and then go through the benefits of the solution. So on the next slide, first of all, PK Companies is a 23-year-old company based in Wichita, Kansas, that's owned by 3 brothers. So it's a family-owned business, and they work in a variety of industries. So the focus is on oil and gas, but they also have basically services to petrochemical, heavy industrial manufacturing. From an industrial standpoint, they're the real deal. And the company provides specialized industrial services for these type of companies. So they're in all 50 states. And in addition to that, 5 different countries. And the company is split into 4 divisions. They may actually be separate companies: PK Solutions, PK Safety, PK Industrial, and PK Technologies. And we're going to talk about the CBRS solution that comes out of PK Solutions. So if you can go to the next slide. One of the one of the biggest issues for oil and gas refineries is downtime. And the cost of downtime is very, very significant. And one of the things you have to do with these refineries is these refineries typically have large tanks that need to be inspected and recoded on a regular basis. And when you take down a tank, you're basically taking the refinery offline. So it's heavy downtime. To inspect a tank, you need to drain it, you need to clean the inside, you need to inspect it rigorously for any defects. And then if there are defects, you need to fix those defects. And then you typically need to resurface the tanks with a special protective coating. And this involves a lot of people and chemicals inside these large tanks. And that's very dangerous work. And so there's a lot of, and to add to that complexity, it has to be done quickly to minimize the downtime. And so it's kind of this worst case scenario where you have a really dangerous environment and a lot of pressure to complete it quickly. And so PK Solutions came up with innovative solutions for this to kind of support these refinery inspections and repair services. And specifically, they provide technology to the workforce that keeps them safe and keeps them efficient so that they can do what they need to do safely and get through it very quickly. And what they do is they provide a lot of IoT devices and wearables for the workers. So you have wearables that are tracking biometrics, their biometric data to make sure they're doing okay. And then you also have IoT devices and sensors to sense the environment. You've got a lot of different gases and chemicals there, and that you need to make sure that it's a safe environment, that you're not creating some sort of combustible, dangerous situation where you're sending people down in those tanks. And you also have video cameras because they have dedicated safety officers that are monitoring all of the work that's going on inside of these tanks. So if you go to the next slide, there, from a networking perspective, there's some really difficult requirements. They have tablets with software on the tablets that do the digital inspection, workforce optimization. There's all sorts of devices, the gas monitors, the biometric monitors, wearable devices, tablets, and they all need to be connected pervasively. And so these sites are very, very large. So you have to reach all of the workers and all of the devices that are located at the site. You have to cover the inside of the tanks, obviously, once they're drained. And these tanks can be hundreds of feet tall. I mean, that's one of the reasons they're dangerous. And these tanks can be either ground-based, like in the refinery itself, but you also have tanks on vessels, and that's part of their service as well. So again, they have a requirement to have these worker safety devices to track their vital signs and monitor the environment, and then the video cameras, and you cannot have any fluctuations in quality of service. So on the next slide, so that from a networking standpoint, the key challenges are these refineries cover very, very large locations, and there's a lot of metal structures with odd shapes that make it very, very difficult to create a wireless network. And again, they need that coverage inside of the tanks. They tried to use Wi-Fi, it just didn't work. And Wi-Fi is great for some circumstances, a lot of applications. But in this particular application, it didn't meet their needs. It didn't give them the required pervasive coverage, and it wasn't stable enough or robust enough to meet their demands. We talk about a lot of times the best use cases for OnGo CBRS, and I like to refer to this as very wide area LANs, where you need to create a private local network that covers a wide area. And these oil refineries is a perfect example of why that matters. They tried to use public LTE, and again, public LTE is great for a lot of applications, but not necessarily for their application. The wireless providers do a great job of making sure that they cover where the people are, but they don't necessarily have great coverage at these remote industrial locations. And there's a situation where you can have lower priority traffic that creates network congestion. So you have a situation where you have these IoT devices that are critical for worker safety, and they're competing with regular cell phone users in that spectrum. And so as a result, using public LTE in this application, they weren't able to provide that quality of service, that assured quality of service to these life-critical IoT devices and wearables. So if you go to the next slide, the solution that they have it's a private wireless solution that is based on, it's a completely dedicated, secure wireless network, and it has full capacity for all of the on-site workers, all of the various devices to support those workers, and it controls which workers have access to the network, and you can ensure specific workers and specific devices get the right level of priority and performance. So how did they do this? They created a private wireless network using OnGo CBRS infrastructure and devices. And so they used Cradlepoint for the routers, and I'll explain that. So they have Nokia for the infrastructure. In this case, you can see that that device on the left actually says We LTE. That is their LTE small cell based on Nokia and the core network. And that's broadcasting OnGo CBRS. In many cases, they have some devices that support CBRS natively, maybe cameras or laptops. But then there are other devices, and that's the problem. One of the challenges they have is there's a variety of devices. They have other devices that don't support CBRS natively. Maybe they're Wi-Fi, or maybe they're Ethernet, or maybe they're Bluetooth, or maybe they're GPIO. It's a full range of devices, but they all need to have that connectivity. And for those devices, that's where a gateway comes in line. And so that's what we're doing, is providing the gateway for those different devices. And another interesting thing about this solution is in some cases, the refineries want to set it up as a permanent solution so that they don't have to deal with setting up or taking it down, or maybe they use it in between inspections for other applications. But their service is fairly unique. They can come in 2 weeks and perform all of these tank inspections and repairs. And as part of their solution, they provide the ability to set up a temporary network, to come in there, set up the small cells, set up the temporary network, mobilize the workforce, do all their work, and then tear it down again and go somewhere else. And so there's a couple different models for this, but again, it consists of the tablets, all the devices, and then the network itself. That is the solution that PK Solutions is selling. And it's either sold directly to refineries or their managed service providers, or in some cases, there are other PK companies that can come in and perform this work as a service as well. So if you go to the next slide, we interviewed a couple of folks at PK Solutions. One is Ben Burris, who's their Chief Technology Officer, and then Justin Nickel, who's their Director of Marketing. But talking about the CTO perspective and from a networking standpoint, he was basically saying he loves Private LTE, loves OnGo CBRS, because they can show up at a site, at one of these job sites, put up the temporary towers. They can control how much bandwidth, who's using it, and using LTE, the same technology that we all love from the public LTE carriers. But you can go to these different devices and say, here are the ones I need to have top priority. And as you can imagine, safety-related devices get top priority. And if you ever have any bandwidth congestion issues on your private network, you can shut off other devices so that you can focus the network on the safety devices, the safety professionals, the safety officers that need to make sure that they have that focus. And so you can see in the upper right, the Director of Marketing talked, the number one focus is how do you do it safely but quickly. And they really struggled before trying the Wi-Fi. They struggled before trying public LTE, but they said the bottom line is when, they're marketing this as a service, and that's why the Director of Marketing is talking. When you have these workers inside of confined spaces, you have to have that connectivity because their lives are at stake. And so this is how they market their service. It's basically the reliability of the devices, the safety that it provides the workers, and the private network that supports them. And you can see the final quote from Ben was just talking about quality of service is such a key issue for them, and they couldn't really do that on a public LTE network, and you can't do that on Wi-Fi. So if you go to the next slide, talking about the benefits of private LTE, and specifically OnGo CBRS, is you have this highly reliable wireless connectivity that is pervasive. And again, they have a range of devices, some that have native CBRS, some that don't, some that are high powered, some that aren't. And there's a lot of different that's why you need gateways like what we provide at Cradlepoint to be able to address kind of that certain element, because frankly, most of the devices that they're talking about aren't not going to have CBRS directly attached to it. The second challenge we talked about, but it's QoS, and you just typically don't get that with Wi-Fi. You don't get it with public LTE. That's really controlled by the carriers, and you really, it's, I think the one example that the carriers have done is for public safety workers with their FirstNet network, trying to give priority access presumption. But for everyone else, if you want to set up your private network and be able to have that kind of control, that's where OnGo CBRS is just fantastic. From a coverage standpoint, it's under your control. If there's some coverage issues you have and you want to extend that somewhere, you can set up your small cells yourself. You can add that coverage. And if you need to add more small cells for more capacity, that's under your control as well. So it really is gives some key benefits when it comes to coverage capacity and performance. The other thing is, because it's your own network and it's using unlicensed spectrum, from a cost control standpoint, you don't have to worry about data caps and how much bandwidth am I consuming. Since it's your network, you can use as much bandwidth as the network you set up can support. And if you need to add more bandwidth, you can add more bandwidth just by adding more infrastructure. And then from a security standpoint, I think there's a lot of separate discussions about LTE versus Wi-Fi, but LTE really has some very, very good inherent security features built into it around, data encryption, the use of SIM cards and the ability to provision SIMs to control which devices have access to your network. And then when you extend that to the CBRS gateway or router, you have the ability, because a lot of times the devices attached to them are low power devices, or maybe they don't have a lot of processor power or memory power. And so the router itself can do everything from intrusion prevention, intrusion detection, URL filtering, just make sure that that the devices itself are as protected as possible. And then finally, from a network management troubleshooting standpoint, we, with our solution at Cradlepoint, it's a cloud-based solution, and they love that because they can have kind of a NOC with a lot of their networking technicians who can monitor the things that are important to them, the performance, the quality of service, usage, data usage, etc., and do that remotely from a central location. So if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to give you some information. If you want to learn more about PK Solutions, this is their website. The solution that I just described, they set up a special website for it. It's called Wevix. That's the brand name that they use for the solution. So wevix.com/WeLTE. Here's some information about Cradlepoint. We have a separate landing page for the private LTE work that we're doing at Cradlepoint. And then more information from what Nokia is doing, both as a company as well as their private LTE network. And as part of the follow-up, we have a printed case study in a white page format, and we'll send that out as a follow-up. But the bottom line is their CTO, Ben Burris, he's really excited because once you set up that network, that's a lot of times these networks ROI on the initial deployment, the initial setup. But now that you have the network, the incremental cost of adding additional applications is a lot smaller. And so they're really excited to look at other things that they can add. I mean, they're already looking at adding big data applications. They're looking at adding, push to talk chat functionality to use it as worker communication. And they're looking to add other devices that maybe have, something different than worker safety. But once you have that network in place, the sky's the limit as to what else you can do with it. So with that, I will turn it back over to Alan. I'll just leave my video on because I think we're going to do some Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, and Jim, join us as well. We have gotten a couple of questions. The first question is, I think, to you, Ken, and it's really around the slide where you mentioned specifically Nokia, Cradlepoint. But from the perspective of the ecosystem, this is a broad ecosystem, right, of equipment manufacturers, types, etc. This, for your example, that was specific, but interoperability allows for a great diversity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I have a slide that I use with some of our ecosystem partners. I mean, we've been very, very aggressive about reaching out to all of the different members of the ecosystem. And I think, I think in some cases, I mean, we've provided Cradlepoint routers, and in some cases we've become kind of the center of interoperability testing for that CBRS equipment. So this case study highlights Nokia, but James is on there with GeoVerse. Our deployment at American Dream Mall that has gotten a lot of attention is Cradlepoint working with GeoVerse and JMA Wireless. You've got Ericsson, Solona, Athonet, Druid, Samsung, all these different folks that we work with on the infrastructure side. And then of course on the back end, whether it's Google or CommScope or Federated Wireless. The thing that's exciting for all of this to work is each of the ecosystem players have different strengths. And so really you can look at your application and really kind of decide, maybe this application might be better suited for a Ruckus, or this might be better suited, for GeoVerse, et cetera. But that's the beauty of having a rich ecosystem.
Yeah, good way of putting it. Jim, let me direct this one towards you. So the question is about backhaul, and if you have a backhaul for a particular industrial solution, how do you move that around to different sites, especially if things are deployed temporarily or pop up or whatever? How do you manage the backhaul side of this equation? Oh, muted. You're still muted, Jim. There you go.
Thanks for that, Alan. I probably would have never figured that out. So, so there's a variety of what you might call temporary location installations with CBRS that have appeared on the scene, both because of COVID and even for job site construction projects. CBRS is quickly becoming a de facto. Again, Wi-Fi wasn't good enough, carrier kind of networks weren't good enough, and the backhaul varies. So sometimes, like for construction sites and industrial sites, you'll actually have a lot of fiber available. So you'll take advantage of that fiber and put up a base station location around the fiber. In other spots, you may not have fiber availability, in which case you could take advantage of a simple internet connection like you have like with DSL, cable, or even microwave as your backhaul. And some of the microwave that you're seeing today, it may not be called microwave anymore, I might be dating myself, is actually working in the CBRS band. So there's a ton of ecosystem partners that have had product in the adjacent band to CBRS band, and now because of what happened with CBRS, are making their product in CBRS band. So that's how I see the backhaul playing out at various temporary installations.
And Alan, I might just add something real quick to that. So in addition to everything that James has said, we've had customers that are actually using public LTE in some cases as backhaul, because with today we have gigabit LTE that you can use, and with a mobile operator, even if they can't get into every nook and cranny of a refinery, you can point a Yagi antenna at their tower and use that as backhaul. And we just launched our 5G solutions as well last week. We're deploying initially in Australia, and we also believe that 5G is going to be a very, very effective backhaul for these private LTE and later private 5G networks that are being deployed as well.
Good, yeah, thanks for adding that in, Ken. Here's an interesting question, and it's maybe a little bit away from our use case, but it's probably something that you guys take a swing at. So I'll read the question directly. Do you always need dual SIM, or can you roam to your private CBRS network from a public network automatically when you only have one SIM?
You want me to answer that, Ken?
Yes.
So there's a couple ways to do CBRS. One of the ways is you go and get, it's complicated, but you go and get assets like a shared HNI from the CBRS Alliance. You pay a bit of money, and you could program yourself to run an LTE network that way. If you do it that way, you're only going to be able to use that in CBRS only mode. one of the things GeoVerse does is, because we're a cellular carrier, we're actually part of the largest wholesale roaming carrier in the United States. We offer our what's called PLMN code, or HNI, so an alternative to that CBRS Alliance code, which allows you to use your product in both CBRS and then roam or interconnect with the public cellular networks as well. But you can't do that by just using the code that you would get through the CBRS Alliance. And so if Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile started offering this to partners and other people in the ecosystem, you could use them, but I don't see them doing that. So we're kind of that alternative.
Gotcha.
And I would just,
and getting back to the original question, is we can do that in both a single SIM mode, or if you have a device already on a public carrier, you can put our SIM in the second SIM slot and use it either way.
Yeah. And an example of that, and I'll go back to our deployment with GeoVerse at the American Dream Mall. Again, this is the big Meadowlands Sports Complex that has MetLife Stadium and then the American Dream Entertainment Complex. If you have a security vehicle with that has a CBRS router and a GeoVerse SIM, when you're on site, you can use the local private network. But if that security vehicle or maintenance vehicle has to drive into the city and goes off site, that GeoVerse SIM will basically let them roam into the public network. There is another option where you can have two modems, and we've talked about this in the past, where you have one private LTE SIM and one public LTE SIM. And this is where we're on the magic quadrant for software-defined WAN. So this is lets you set application-specific policies for when you use the public network and which applications use the private network.
Got it. Keep those questions coming in. If you have questions, please post them in the question box. In the meantime, for both of you gentlemen, what are the common, or what are the highest or most common challenges that you're seeing expressed by potential customers, industrial customers, in their communications needs?
Well, I can go ahead if you're ready, but
well, I was just going to say, I think the ones that I talked about with regards to PK Solutions and their customers, I think are very, very representative of other deployments that we've had. And so, I think it's the challenges are, how do I address this very large area? And we talked about an oil refinery, but that could be a stadium. It could be a college campus. It could be an enterprise campus. It could be, an amusement park, a shipping port, an airport. And so that really fundamentally is the biggest challenge, is how do you address all of that? And if you think about an airport, there are thousands of endpoints at those airports. It's everything from, the management, the digital signage and the things for the cars coming into the airport. You have the stuff inside of the terminal regarding the gateways and agents. You have all the stuff on the airport field. The maintenance vehicles that are servicing the navigation equipment. You have air traffic control, you have the fire and rescue. There are thousands of devices, and it gets tricky when you try to do that with Wi-Fi.
Well,
yeah, and Ken and Alan, I have a little bit different perspective because I'm looking at it from a kind of a broader scope. And as you get down into some of the devices being used in industrial, and the same thing can apply to retail, a lot of those devices are not mainstream devices. They're made by companies like Honeywell or Zebra, et cetera. And right now, those devices don't have CBRS enablement to them just yet. So part of the challenge is you're not able to solve every single use case with CBRS because that side of the ecosystem has not caught up yet. So I kind of view that as, when that happens, you're going to kind of unlock Pandora's box and start seeing more of, all these additional use cases appear, because a lot of stuff that the general public isn't aware of has to go on over Wi-Fi, even though an industrial user may not want it to go on over Wi-Fi.
Well, very good. Any last points either you gentlemen would like to make sure that folks are aware of?
No, I just thank you for the opportunity, and you want to learn more about the CBRS Alliance, Alan's the man.
Absolutely. No, thanks. Thanks. Good questions, by the way. They're, this stuff may appear complex, but having, all of us have set up our private LTE networks. It's actually not that hard. You just need to know the right people to talk to.
Exactly.
Point.
And these are a couple of the right guys that I'm looking at on my screen, and that's what I'm pointing at. So that's why it looks a little bit odd. But I want to thank both of our presenters. Excellent job today, Ken, James. As always, I rely on you guys for so much, and the expertise that you bring to the table here is unparalleled. Great job on the presentations. For all of our folks in attendance today, thank you for joining us today. We're going to make sure that this recording is available on the CBRS Alliance website, so you'll be able to download that and share that with your colleagues. Information about how to get a hold of Ken and James there as well. So if you'd like to continue a conversation with them, that will be a way for you to do that. With that, I wish everybody good health, stay well, stay safe out there during these crazy days. We're here as part of an industry helping to keep people connected when they can't be together. And that's, I think, a really good thing that we're very happy to be part of that kind of service to our fellow citizens here. So with that, I will say thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and please join us again for another webinar, I believe next month, roughly the middle of the month. We'll advertise that, and we'll continue to bring you news about the CBRS world. Until then, take care and goodbye.
Thank you.